about backbone.js. I'm Veronica Rebagliatte. I work at Network and also part of ICSA Montevideo. What are we going to see today? First of all, let us see what Backbone is, how to use it, why use a library or framework, what are the alternatives, how to pick one, and we're going to see the type of backbones and some examples. First of all, what is Backbone? It is a library. It was created by Jeremy Askenas. It is lightweight. It has about 1,500 lines, a commented code, so it's easy to read. It is free and it is open source. And it provides a lot of utilities via underscores. It was extracted from document cloud. Both Backbone and Undercode were extracted from document cloud, and they became then open source, so quite cool. And it is MV asterisk. This means that you have to be very careful with the terms. Because the problem is that it is not modern view controller as we're used to from Rails. If Rails is model view controller, Backbone is model view template. Because Rails is for MVC in the server and Backbone is for MVT in the client. But this is an issue of terms. Models map models, but the views of Rails would map the templates of backbones because they are HTML interpoled. Because they are views, and this complicates things. And then we have the controllers of Rails, which would map the views of Backbone, because they take the data of the models and send them to the templates to do their work, which is HTML. So why do I need a library or a framework as a backbone to start with? First of all, because of the client-side rendering. Everybody asks you for these complex applications that render part of the page so that the client has a context, and all this is very nice and interesting with this type of library. Another event that it solves a lot is the event-driven approach. For example, for the single-page apps is quite wonderful. And it also solves something that we all find when in the server you have a model and then you want to reflect this on the client side. So it is, well, I will duplicate the data, so you need to have two things. So that is why we have the model mirror. Then separation of concerns. This allows you to have all the rationale of the business and the model separated from the logic that renders all these interfaces, renders all the operations. So another thing that this allows you to have, so everything I have just mentioned, but in addition to this, we want to have the functionalities that we had from before, with the browser to go back and forth. And another thing that makes us tempted to use this kind of libraries is this model of a single API and many client apps pattern, especially in the case where you need your application, your web application, and you also want to have an iOS. So this overlaps. You have to do for iOS with what you have to do to use JSONs and Backbone. So this is great because they both overlap. Now, what are the alternatives apart from Backbone? Well, quite a lot, too many. It's impressive. Now we have Flight, which was one that Twitter got out, which is great, and it's not even new. I just found out about this. Now maybe you have 20 more. So what do I do with all those alternatives? My opinion is that the best thing is to start deciding on whether you want to have a library or a framework. So you rule out half of all the list, and then things are sort of better. So what is the library approach? The library approach is something that is more lightweight and gives you more possibilities for decision making. And the framework approach gives you something that is ready, it's faster, but then afterwards, if you want to take out something or if you want to change something, things get more complicated. Imagine you just want to take out the ketchup between the onion, so this is like take it or leave it, or start from scratch. So this is the same concept with this libraries and framework. And this is a typical war. You have Rails, Sinatra, Emmer, and Backbone. So it's always the same story. Now, what does this mean regarding code? A library gets called by me, but a framework, it is a framework that calls me. Now, what do I mean with this? A library is like a set of functionalities, so I can go and call those things when I need them, and if I don't do anything, it just remains there where it is. Now, the frameworks, what they have, is like a totally different approach. They have everything ready there, and they leave some blank spaces so you can fit in your things. And it is they who call you. So that is what we call inversion of control. It is they who control the show, and you just go there and do your work. You just try to fit in where you come in. So which do you choose? Well, there is no solution. This all depends. That's the way it is. This depends on your project. If you are going to need something very fast and quite standard, and this can be solved by a framework, wonderful. But then if you're doing something that you know will be supplement log, don't suffer fighting against a framework. Just go and use a library as a backbone. And now, what about the backbone classes? First of all, we have the routers. The routers map URL to methods, then the history. It observes the changes and triggers the callbacks. And the views own a DOM element. And this issue of the views is that in the same screen you can have several views, and each reigns over a certain part. So different parts are then rendered. And these views have the capacity of rendering DOM via the templates. They send the data to the templates, and they deploy to HTML, they go to the string, and there you get the element. And the views might observe model events. So, if my data are updated or whatever, the view knows when it has to render again. This is not automatic. You have to do this like everything, of course. But at the end, this is what you should do. So the views handle user input. The events that occur in the DOM. So they are both sides. They handle user input, and they handle what you get from the data update. And they also invoke the method models. But views are pretty much like the Rails controller. And the templates, they are interpolated HTML. The models, the backbone models, represent a single record, like a tweet. And the collections contain groups of instances of the same model, like tweets. Now, what collections do, they group these instances so they can apply the underscore models. And models and collections represent the data. Well, something about code. The great Twitter. The first thing you do is to initialize the app. You define the model, collections, views, routers, etc. And the important thing happens in the initialize. And I visit it with the history, and I do it when you have the ready. It is not self-loaded. In router, it is created extending the backbone router. This is generated extending the backbone, and it has a hash of the routes on the left side. You have the URL, and after the colon, you have the function that you have to call. Then you have the initialize, which does the instance for the collection, and it fills it in. Here I'm calling fetch, but the important thing is that when you do start with the collection, it comes empty, so the instance is filled. And then I define any of the functions that I mentioned at the beginning in the router hash. I start entering all the functions. Then the collections. These collections are prepared extending the collections. And you have a model and a URL. And this lets the backbone know what route has to be followed if you want to update a tweet. If you update a tweet, I do a print, and then it's /1. Now the model. The model is created extending the backbone model. And what you have here, it is empty, of course, is the rationale of the business. First of all, you could ask yourself, well, I don't know the attributes, so that it takes from the JSONs that come in, so you don't need to define them once again. So in that sense, it realizes this. But if I want to follow a rationale with these attributes, something on the client side, then this is where you have to incorporate that business rationale, the same as with the other models.
And view. Well, this is the most complex piece of code that I'm going to show, so don't get frightened, it doesn't get worse than this. So the view is developed by extending the backbone view, and what you do first is to define what template you're going to play with, and that is why actually it's a project of backbone from one side and the other. None of them has nothing to do, because in the end, as you don't get linked to any kind of name or directory structure, so you can do what you want. I like to follow conventions on Rails, but that's a personal thing. And in the end, it's important. The important thing is that you have to declare what the template is, and then you declare an event hash. That is, event selector and the function. Always event, always in that order. Event is a bit. The button is you tweet, and the function is create tweet, and you define it below. The electors there, the good thing is that they are scoped in that element of view, and that's why they're short, and it seems unimportant, but when you want to refactor it later, it's very easy because you can move things, and it's sort of as everything continues to work. It's rather cool. And then you have the initialize. What it does is to give events to the collection. For instance, here what I'm telling is, well, a new element was added to the collection, reset it, reset again, and so on. So this is what we said earlier. With the event hash, what I'm doing, the event hash, there alone, I'm actually responding to the users, and with the other one, I'm responding to changes in the data. And then what I do is render all this. I take the element and I tell them, fill with this HTML. And inside that HTML function, what I pass is the template inserted with the data. So I'm in view, I pass something to the template does its things. I can pass, I say data because actually I can pass a collection of a model, a string, whatever. The template injects that into HTML, it sends back a string, the view raises it and throws it in its element. And that's it. Then I define the other functions, and it's the hash of events up there. This is a template. It has no rocket science. Actually, it's very simple. Here I'm reiterating on the collection, and this was for the purpose of the presentation, just to shorten it. But the good thing here really is to have some more granularity. Instead of passing the collection and having to render everything in URL, that would be rapid. Then you pass a model, so when something new is created, an LI is what is rendered again, and not everything. But it was 2 more slides of code. But so you understand the idea. That is that view passes the data to template, and then from template back to view. That's the important thing. So recapping. So we instantiate the router map routes with functions, load collections on them. The collection associates a model with a URL. The model has adds attribute logic, and view associates a template, passes the data, renders the results, and handles the events in the 2 sides, the users and the other, and binds them. As a conclusion then, Backbone is quite good because it gives us usefulness, it solves quite common problems, and it gives us some structure. But ultimately, it's not like a framework that you sort of throw it there and it starts walking on its own. You must be patient at the beginning. But the good thing is that ultimately, something custom, even when at the beginning it may be more expensive, it may end up by